Hi guys, welcome back to Future Dimensions 360. As you know, in our last tutorial, we had learned about the basics, what and why of useReducer hook. Now it's a time to dive into the code and learn with the help of example how we can implement useReducer hook. So in our today's tutorial, we will be learning a basic and very simple form of useReducer hook by using a normal counter example as we are doing before by using useState hook or useEffect hook in our earlier in the current series. So let me go ahead and try to create a new component called counter.js RFCE. We will create a functional component in which we will be creating three buttons. One will called increment. Let me hit copy and paste buttons 3 times. The second will be decrement and the third one will be reset. So what we have to do in this counter, we have to perform three operations called increment, decrement and reset. So we will be performing these all three actions by using useReducer hook. So let's break it down into three different pieces. You have to go on with three pieces to understand useReducer hook in detail. The first one is, let's say, call the useReducer function. So as I told you in our last tutorial that useReducer hook takes two parameter as an input. The first one is called reducer and the second one is called initial state. This is our first step to call the reducer hook and passing two parameters into it. The first one is our reducer method and the second one is initial state. Although we are implementing a counter, so our initial state for the counter will be 0. Let me go ahead out of my component and declare the initial state initial initial state. It will be initial initial state equals to 0. So our initial state for the counter will be 0. Second step we have to follow is to create a reducer function. Reducer is nothing but just a method or an arrow function that accepts two parameter. One is called current state and the other one is called action. So current state will be the one that you are passing as always, and the action will be the operation you want to perform. You have to keep it in mind that these two parameters allow you to perform any kind of action on your state. For example, your current state is 0. You want to perform an increment action, so you can perform by passing in an action and increment in the state. You can perform decrement as well and reset as well. So for that one, what you have to do is you have to identify the action. Action should be either increment in our case or decrement or reset. So for that one, the best thing is to use switch to pass an action. So inside switch, we will have some cases. For example, the first case is increment. So in case of increment, what we have to do is we have to return current state plus 1. In case I have decrement, I'll just copy paste the code. In case I had an action decrement, what I have to do is I have to perform a decrement action in my current state. In case my action is reset, what I have to do here is I have to simply return what? Initial state. Let me go ahead and try to create another case called default. As you guys know, there is default case in each switch statements. In case of default state case, I have to return simply current state as it is without performing any action. This is the second step. First step is to call the reducer method and pass two parameter, the initial state and a reduce method. The second step is to create a reduce method in which you have access to your action and the current state. While identifying the actions, you can perform certain types of action. In our case, we are performing three different type of action. One of them is increment, the second one is decrement, and the third one is reset. Now the third step is the returned values from the useReducer hook. Similar to useState hook, useReducer hook returns two values. One will be our counter or current state. I can say current state, and the second one will be dispatch. The counter is our current state, or we are returning always from the current state counter. I will just rename it from current state to current counter. It will be more easier for you guys to understand. Current counter. So use reducer hook always return a current counter and the dispatch method. The dispatch method will allows you to perform an action within this reducer function. So first of all, what I have to do here is I will say counter, and I will just show the counter value in the JSX. Secondly, what I have to do here is I have to create on click handler to each of my button, passing in an arrow function, and I have to call dispatch method. This dispatch method take action as an input that will pass by the use reducer hook towards your reducer method. So what is my action in case of increment? My action is increment. In case of decrement, my action is decrement. And in case of reset, my action is reset. So that's it for use reducer hook. Let me go ahead and try to import this component into my app.js file. Let's hit save and have a look into our browser. You guys can see I have counter. The initial value for the counter is 0. Let me do it, wrap it with div so it will appear in multiple lines. It will be more easier for you guys to understand. So my initial value for the counter is 0. What is the initial value? Here I had created an initial value and passed in my use reducer hook. Let me hit increment. You guys can see my counter is incrementing +1 in each click event of increment. And on each click event of decrement, my counter is getting decremented. If I click reset, counter is resetted back to 0. This is the very basic knowledge of use reducer hook. Let me go ahead and explain you one more time the three different methods, the three steps we have to perform when we have to use reducer hook. The first one is import the use reducer hook, call the use reducer hook and pass two parameters. First one will be your reducer method and the second one will be your initial state. Secondly, you have to create an initial state, initialize it with your initial value, that's 0, and then the second one is to create a reducer method. According to your actions, you can perform actions in it. In our case, we are going on with increment, decrement, and reset. So we had passed all these cases into our switch statement. Third step is use reducer hook returns you guys a current value for the counter and a dispatch method. That dispatch method helps you to pass a action in your reducer function. The viewers that have knowledge about Redux should know the syntax of Redux. That's what I am telling you in our last tutorial, that useReducer hook is a bit similar to Redux. Same thing, it's initial state in Redux you guys are doing, it's nothing but just a value. In that case of Redux, you can create an object as well or an array as well. Reducer method, any kind of method you can create in Redux, and you can take state or action payload as a parameter. That actions helps you to perform any kind of action what you want to do in your Redux functionality. This is the very basic and simple example with use reducer hook. I hope you guys understand it. See you in the next video with some sort of complex example. Please don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. Thank you. Goodbye.